where Senator Portman and I saw firsthand the extent of the damage inflicted by the Russian invasion. I was troubled to learn that, according to your written disclosures, Twitter's leadership recently considered agreeing to the Putin regime's request to censor and surveil Russian Twitter users. Twitter ultimately did not agree to Putin's request, as far as I understand. What can you tell us about requests made by foreign governments and the risks that those demands pose? And why would a company like Twitter consider agreeing to a request to censor or surveil users?
I was very surprised and shocked by that one-on-one conversation which I had with Mr. Agrawal. This was prior to his assuming the CEO role. I understand to be it out of a frustration of the inability to perform, and this kind of goes into content moderation, which we talked about before, and while that wasn't my main bailiwick, and I've been informed I shouldn't go into details about conversations I've had with Twitter counsel, there was we don't really have the ability and tools to do things correctly. This is a lot of work. It's not, driving our main executive incentive goals. Is there a way that we can simply punt? And since they have elections, doesn't that make them a democracy?
Thank you. I am a big believer that these companies, and not just Twitter, have to invest more in protecting data and protecting the public. And I heard Senator Durbin talk to you about the agencies, right? And you, I think, agree with me that the agencies in the U.S. are underfunded when it comes to taking on these major cases. But I want to turn to ourselves and put the mirror back on ourselves here in Congress. Do you think it would be helpful if we pass some privacy legislation in Congress?
I think one thing that would be very helpful is that the FTC and other regulators don't have laws or rules that would create whistleblower protection programs for people while they were still in these organizations. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where, I learned a lot of information. A lot of people wanted to share the information. When I came on board, they were excited that there was an executive that was listening and that was willing to ruffle feathers, that was willing to fight for some of these things because they had tried to raise them.
Yeah, I understand.
Think, yes.
Okay. Are you aware that Senator Grassley and I actually passed a bill to change the merger fees that passed through this committee, unanimously passed through the Senate? It's now sitting somewhere in purgatory over in the House, that would allow us to fund the FTC. So maybe they would be as scary as France or some other country, and that we have been unable to pass that, or actually, despite this probably being our 50th hearing between, I'm looking at Senator Blackburn, between Commerce and Judiciary, we have not passed one bill out of the U.S. Senate when it comes to competition, when it comes to privacy, when it comes to better funding the agencies, when it comes to the protection of kids that Senator Blumenthal and Senator Blackburn have worked on. And so at some point, when we talk about the agencies, I think we better be putting the mirror on ourselves, because I was listening to your quote from Sinclair Lewis, a Minnesotan. It is difficult to get someone to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it. Could you talk about the lack of action in Congress and how that has actually created an environment where these companies feel like they can do everything from destroying our newspapers and our public good to basically not taking correct actions when it comes to hacking?
So that's your world, not mine. I appreciate the efforts and the work that you're doing. What I did see is that any laws or bills passed or actions in the past, if they are not able to be quantified and externally audited by an independent viewer, get gamed a lot by what I saw inside big tech in their ability to sort of answer in an affirmative without actually doing what the intention was of the rule, law, or regulation.
Mm-hmm. One other bill I want to mention, and Senator teamed up here with Senator Coons and Portman on this, Platform Accountability and Transparency Act, to require digital platforms to give researchers access to data. And the independent experts that you hired to audit Twitter's processes for addressing disinformation found serious problems, made recommendations, But however, I think Twitter's leadership didn't listen. In your view, why do you think Twitter failed to act on the recommendations made related to the disinformation? And how could independent groups help?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of independent groups having independent eyes and providing ground truth on that. I think this is, I should be clear, first off, the engineers and the employees want this change. The culture, and I can speak primarily about Twitter because that's what I'm here to talk about in the most recent big tech company I've been involved with. It's a culture where they don't prioritize. They're only able to focus on one crisis at a time. And that crisis isn't completed. It's simply replaced by another crisis.
Correct.
So I think they would like to wave a magic wand and have all of these things fixed, but they're unwilling to bite the bullet and look strategically and say, hey, we're going to have to devote some time and money to get these basic things in place and to be honest with their investors, the public, their board, themselves, and do the legwork rather than just react to what's coming in that they hear from a hearing like this or from the news just until the next crisis comes along.
As opposed to us putting some long-term rules in place. Last thing, you talked about in your disclosures that Twitter does not have enough resources focused on removing misinformation and hate speech. In particular, you noted that half of the content flagged for review in Twitter Spaces features was in a language that employees didn't even speak. Obviously, you can't check whether a tweet violates Twitter's rules if you don't speak the language. I have had my own experience directly conveying a misinformation that was put out on me that resulted in an attack on a member of my family. And I don't know if you knew that because I told Jack Dorsey about it. And nothing ever changed, except when finally regular media reported that it was a lie. But those are the kinds of things that happen to people in this building because of the misinformation that is rampant on social media. Could you comment about what you think they should be doing about that?
I'm very sorry to hear about that. The lack of language was stunning to me. This was a situation where I brought in a world-class leader for Twitter Global Support who also identified this, and we started saying, you can't react to a language situation. When something was happening in Myanmar, you can't wait until after it happens and then go, where are the Burmese speakers? Let's see who we can hire. Those translators are already hired elsewhere. You have to understand, 80% of Twitter has to understand, 80% of their users are outside of the United States. You can't create, a healthy environment. You can't serve the public conversation if all you can do is look at it and say, I hope Google Translate's doing the right job for me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Klobuchar. Senator Kennedy.